with the Murray River running across the top, coming down, and the Goulburn River coming off the Murray. And it's going to tell the story of when my mum and dad met or came together at Cumragunja, which is on the other side of the river, the New South Wales side of the river, and how they came down into Victoria to Maribna, which is where I was born, and my brother James, and tell the story of how my parents then separated and my mother raising me and my brother as a single mum, and how she coped with a child that, didn't cope with a child with polio, which is me.
Alice Solomon was born in 1956 to parents Violet May Smith and John Heeland. In 1956, the year in which Alice was born, was the last time a polio or infantile paralysis epidemic occurred in Australia. That year, the first mass vaccinations were introduced. Alice, however, was not immunised, and she contracted the disease as a baby.
She was forced to give me and my brother up for adoption or for foster. Mum left me at public convenience and rang the authorities to tell them where I was, and they promptly came and got me. And as far as I know, I was put into a reception centre. There's not a lot of memories good memories that I had from that time. I remembered I used to get yelled at and smacked quite a fair bit if I wet the bed or anything like that, which was quite common, and I was pretty badly malnourished.
Alice spent 5 months in an institution until she was temporarily placed with a foster family, the Stallions.
I was then taken to the Stallions' house in Doveton. They're a family that basically take care of Aboriginal children. That was their main goal in life, was just to foster and take care of Aboriginal children. And a few of the children they adopted as well. And that was a nice time, a nice memory.
Alice was then placed with the start-up family, Ernie and Elsie.
The start-ups, Ernie and Elsie, actually paid a visit to the Stallions' house, and they saw me, spotted me in the middle of the kitchen floor. I was actually on a rocking horse, and they spotted me and fell in love with me immediately. They just had eyes for nobody else, and so it was a meeting that changed my life. I fell in love with them too, because they were just so giving and sweet people. They're an English couple, and they came out. I think they were fated to adopt me. They were a very loving couple. They showered me with everything that I'd never had before. Dad was an ex-merchant marine. He was a ship worker, but he was very loving. He used to, every payday, he'd take me out and buy me special gifts and stuff like that. And one of the things I remember him buying me was a fur cap coat and muffs And that was one of my favourite things, was snuggling into. And Mum, well, she was the best cook that you'd ever had. But I didn't appreciate her cooking at that time. The only thing I really used to like was baked beans. Love baked beans, still do to this day. I used to wait out the front when he came home from work to work in the factory, and I'd wait out the front on paydays for him to come home, because I knew I was going to end up going shopping with him, and I'd get a treat. But that wasn't the only reason I wanted to go out with him. He was just a good dad. And one morning, it was around my 6th birthday, he didn't come home. I sat there and sat there and sat there, no sign of Dad, and I haven't seen him since. And there's never been any sign of him from that day to this. Never any paper trail left. He's just vanished. I don't know whether he left Mum or, just some sort of accident, or he's run into foul play somewhere. And you take it all on. You think, oh, Dad doesn't love you anymore and that sort of thing. Doesn't want to come home, and yeah.
The start-ups had fled war-torn London, where Elsie had lost family members. When her husband left her, she found it difficult to cope.
She didn't cope very well at all. She discovered she had to go out and work because Dad left us with a lot of bills. The car got repossessed that we had. I had to sell. Well, we had a house that we had to sell. And she gave up her job and became a full-time live-in mum. Went on to deserted wife's pension, and then started drinking. That was not the best thing to have happened, because she'd come and pick me up after school and take me to the pub, and that was till about 6 o'clock at night. And she'd be really, really, really drunk. And it's many of the time that I would have had to have picked her up off the ground. And many a time when she'd bring a bloke home. Yeah. Wasn't a very good beginning.
In the 1960s, the social welfare branch was responsible for ensuring foster and adoptive placements were satisfactory, and a representative from this department would visit the home.
They used to come around every so often, every 6 to 12 months, I suppose, to check that my clothes were clean, and Mum always managed to keep the place tidy. I've learnt since that time that people, or alcoholics or people with drinking problems, tend to keep a neat shop or neat ship, and probably she knew when they were coming and she'd make sure that everything was ship-shape so that they wouldn't suspect anything. Being diagnosed with polio at a very young age, I had to wear calipers to the age of 6, and it made life really hard for me because I couldn't move around as well as the other kids, and the other kids would stir and say, you're too slow and all that sort of thing, and I couldn't play sports.
Alice found schooling traumatic and she suffered a nervous breakdown. As a result, she was kept down 1 year.
Then I started wearing glasses, and I used to get picked on by the kids, bullied. And they used to torment me and call me monkey face and stuff like that. There was a few older girls in the school who would grab me in the playground if I didn't have my glasses on. They'd say, "Where's your glasses?" And you should be wearing glasses, your little monkey face, and all that sort of thing.
When Alice was around 8 years of age, her foster mother Elsie took up with a man, Frank. They moved from their flat in Frankston to Frank's house at Rosebud.
Yeah, well, I looked on him and I thought, as my dad, I really liked him until he decided to have his way with me. He used to bring this blanket out from the bedroom and snuggle up under the blanket with me, and he started touching me and feeling me, and he used to say, he used to tell me he loved me and all that sort of thing, and how beautiful I was, and I used to think, that's nice to be loved, and I just thought it was the way dads treated their little girls. And he used to say, "Don't tell your mum that we're doing this," and that sort of thing. I said, "Okay." And
Elsie then moved with Alice to Seymour, as Frank was working at the nearby army base at Puckapunyal. Alice was glad to get away from the bullying she was experiencing at school in Rosebud. At Seymour, she was the only child who identified as being Aboriginal.
I used to try to tell Mum what he was doing, but she wouldn't listen. And one night when Mum had too much to drink, and she wasn't being a wife in that sense to Frank, he came into my room and did what he wanted to do with me. I was too frightened to scream or do anything like that until after he left, and then I locked the door and I managed to find some Beck's powders and a drink, and I took some Beck's and hoped that I wouldn't wake up in the morning. And the next thing I remember was Mum knocking. I locked the door. And the next thing I remember was Mum screaming at the door, "Alice, Alice, open the door, what's wrong, what's wrong?" So I never slept with the door shut. I hate being shut in. And she realised then that I was telling the truth. But we still stayed in the house. But she was always wary of him and watched him constantly. And they were always fighting after that time. And there was a time I remember when she'd had a few drinks and she smashed him over the head with a bottle of beer. Yeah. Did I smile?
Alice did not tell anyone else about the abuse until she was in her 20s. Eventually, Elsie successfully applied to the Social Welfare Department for public housing. Frank was no longer part of their lives. At 19, Alice began a course at Swinburne in Melbourne, which had Aboriginal content. One of the other participants was Bruce McGuinness. His brother Joe McGuinness would drop into the course and share his pearls of wisdom. This was a turning point in her life.
It was sort of gave us a taste of what we could do in the community. That was sort of, I think, the precursor to what I'm doing in the community. Here it gave me an insight into career life as opposed to a pure white life. And for many years I walked. I've walked in just one world. I met people like Gary Foley and David Golpalil. It's quite scary. It was very scary because, I was learning words never heard before, a way of speaking I'd never heard before. At one stage I was called a coconut, which to this day I've really, really hated because, of course, at that time I probably was a black girl with a white heart, but it's only because I'd never known anything different. But I learned how to be Koori. I learned how to identify. I found my identity there. One of the elders there, Uncle Joe McGuinness, knew who I was, and he knew where Mum was, and he got in contact with her and gave her the details of where I was, and she came knocking on the door. And when she knocked on the door, it was like looking at myself. We were so much alike. She was crying and she said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I said no, but I knew who she was. Couldn't be beyond knowing who she was. She was so much like me. Yeah, she told me the story of my dad being an abusive alcoholic, and she just couldn't live in that situation. She told me a lot of the story of why she had to give me away. But before that I had been told that Mum didn't love me and by my foster mother and that sort of thing. She didn't care for me. She was only giving me up so she could go and be a prostitute on the street, and that was no life for me to be involved with. So
the transcripts contained in the 1997 Bringing Them Home report tell us that Stolen Generations children were sometimes told that their parents had died, that they didn't want them, or other untruths. The encounter with her mother led to Alice meeting her biological brother James.
When she came to visit, she gave me photos of him because she'd been able to keep in contact with him. She gave me photos of him and his address. So the next day we went down, we took a train, right, it was the weekend. She came up on a Friday. So on the weekend we went down to Maui, which is where he grew up, and knocked on his door, or on his parents' door, foster parents' door. Did virtually the same thing to him as Mum had done to me, and said, "Do you know who I am?" Because I hadn't told him I was coming. I was just total surprise. I think his dad answered the door, and I said, "Could I speak to James, please?" And he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm his sister." And he went and got him, and James just threw ourselves into each other's arms and hugged and that sort of thing. And I slept in the lounge room that night. He slept on the cot beside me. He didn't lose sight of me.
Homesick, Alice left Melbourne and returned to live in Seymour with Elsie.
My foster mother forbade me from seeing her, so I really didn't keep in contact with her, which in hindsight I wish I had it, because I lost a very vital part of my life growing up. The inherent respect inside me told me, got to respect your mother. my foster mother, that is, and that's what I did.
Although Alice lost contact with her biological mother, she continued to write to her brother James.
The next time I saw him was at my 21st, and I had been, previous to that, I'd been writing letters to him, but Mum didn't like me writing to him, so I had to be really, really sneaky and get my next door neighbour to receive the letters at her place, and I kept them in the bottom drawer in my bedroom, and one day Mum went into the room and found the letters and called me all the deceitful little names under the sun that she could think of, but it didn't worry me because I'd managed to send James an invitation to my 21st, and yeah, that was really, really nice. But because we didn't have room at our place for him to stay at, he stayed at a hotel, and he left the party early and came back a little bit later, and Mum blew the bejeevers out of him, and he also did the same back at her and told her, you know, a few home truths about the way she'd been treating me, and I didn't see him or hear from him for a while after that.
In 1984, Alice met a local Seymour man, Jack Solomon. They married, and Alice, for the first time, felt free from her foster mother.
I think getting married was just the best thing I ever did. It broke the spell, you know, like, because Jack would stand up for me, he'd come to bat for me and that sort of thing.
James has been our little miracle, our big miracle. He's about 6 foot. He towers over the pair of us. Everybody keeps telling us he's a credit to us. We've done really well bringing him up. And that's the difference too, because he's had 2 parents that love him. I've always encouraged him to be proud of his Aboriginality.
During her 20s and 30s, Alice was content to be a devoted wife to Jack and mother to James. But her yearning to connect with her culture and family remained.
The age of 40 was a new beginning for me. You know, I used to think it was a silly statement that life begins at 40, but it really did. Jack and I, my husband, did the radio course at 1FM in Shepparton, and then, you know, we followed on from that and got involved with the radio station here in Seymour.
Guess what?
I got you, babe.
And I got you, babe.
You're right.
And I'm here tonight with Jack to do my usual show.
In the year 2000, another major turning point in Alice's life occurred. Alice was selected to participate in a TAFE course in Seymour with other members of the Aboriginal community. She studied maths, English and Aboriginal art.
Being at TAFE and doing the TAFE course brought me out of myself, and it awakened my interest in my identity.
The thing that I enjoyed the most about being in the art course was being with other Aboriginal women and sharing their stories with them, sharing this commonality with them, and also sharing their art styles, because we all sort of learned off each other. To me it means everything, because it's the way I express myself, my Aboriginality.
Graduating from this course, she went on to further study at TAFE in Seymour. In 1992, Alice was contacted by previously unknown family members. After her biological parents had separated, her father had remarried and had more children with his new wife.
Michael, David and Sue made a promise to my dad that they'd find James and myself. And after Dad passed, they kept that promise. And they heard of Mum's passing and came to a funeral, and after that they found out that I was living in Seymour, and Sue sent me a message via the housing officer in Seymour to say that my sister wanted to get in contact with me, and I didn't even know I had a sister, didn't know I had a brother, didn't know I had other family besides James, and have since discovered that I have extended family right throughout Victoria and up into New South Wales. So, and that's the next step in the journey, is finding my father's family from New South Wales. So that'll be really exciting. I know my father's buried here at the cemetery, and my Uncle Ron, they share a grave together.
Elsie, Alice's foster mother, passed away in 2002, and this gave Alice the freedom to double her efforts to connect with her biological family. She contacted Link Up Victoria, who arranged a family reunion at her biological mother Violet's graveside. Alice does miss her foster mother Elsie, as she was the only mother figure she ever knew.
What I did, I gave James some flowers, Susan and David to put on the graves, and we also put some flowers on my dad's grave as well. His grave, it's about 2 graves over from Mum's, and he was actually buried in the same plot as my Uncle Ron. It's really good to have closure. But it's just not the same, you know? Not knowing them, you know? Losing them at such a young age. This should never happen. We should never get separated. No, families should never ever get separated. It's too hard. It's too hard to come back. I felt regrets. I'm very sorry that, we never got the chance to be together while you were alive. Missed out on a lot with you and with James if we could have been together. And you've got the shade of some nice trees here, Mum. And I'm sure the sun sets on you at the night time at the end of the day. And you've got a grandson named James. You've got grandsons from James's side, Troy and Reese, and they've given you great-grandchildren.
I celebrate your life, Mum's life. I try to be everything that she'd be proud I am to be. And I'm not happy with the lies that I was told about Mum. That she wasn't a good person. And I regret not having the opportunity of finding out just what a nice person she was. And yeah. And I'm going to miss you for the rest of my life.